several times over the last year, after I've mentioned my impending departure from the pulpit, people have come up to me and said, do you have to mention it? And the truth of it is, I do have to mention it. And I have to mention it often. Why? It's because I want you to be ready for that day. And I'd kind of like to be ready for that day myself. In the cycle of a year, this particular year, there are so many last things that I'm doing, and as I come upon a last thing, I'm not only thinking about that last time, but I'm thinking about other times of having done that. Christmas Eve, High Holy Days, coming of age, all of the different things. We had Pesach a couple of weeks ago, and the last time through. So this has been a very reflective kind of year for me, and I suspect it has been when you think about the congregation for a number of you. And so when I'm doing things, I find myself time traveling to some extent. And last week when I was not here, I went last Sunday down to the UU congregation of New Brunswick, where Carol Sissel was being ordained into the ministry. And the room there, the sanctuary, was filled with love. It was beautiful. It was people who were expressing their belief in her, and her expressing her belief that, yes, I can take up this ministry. And of course, I had to reflect back 23 years ago to my own ordination that took place in Burlington, Iowa, and to that experience that was the ceremony, and then the reception that took place afterwards. And then after that, there was just a small group of people that met we went out to a restaurant to have dinner together to just kind of cap off things. And throughout the day, there had been incredible celebration and expressions of love. It's very hard to share with people who have never been ordained into the ministry, especially Unitarian Universalist ministry, because that ordination is an expression of love. You are ordained by the only body that can ordain a UU minister, and that's a congregation. And so, in the act itself, it's an expression of love. And so, in the ceremony, in the reception, all of those things. And a friend of Judy Ortman's and mine, by the name of Sitch Sloan, had come down for the event from Madison, Wisconsin, and he was part of the small group that met for supper after it was all over. And Sitch had not really been there through my transition from being as I look at you, just you members, as I'd gone through my transition from being a lay member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation that I was part of to being ordained. And he was kind of blown away by the whole experience of Unitarian Universalism, but also blown away by the experience of this ordination. And at the dinner, he said, "This is just amazing." He said, "You're amazing, Charlie. What was expressed here today was people's belief in you, that you will be able to be there with and for them, making meaning with them in their lives." And I said, "Sitch, you've got it just about right. You've got it just about right. But the thing is that I don't make the meaning in anybody else's life. What happens, whether it's in a sermon or whether it's sitting up in my office or in somebody's living room, what happens is that if I'm doing my job really well, I'm holding up a mirror so that people can see themselves and see the possibilities of goodness that lie within themselves, and they make the meaning. I get to be there with them for it, but the people make the meaning themselves, having allowed me to be there to help them see what that meaning is. And that's what I have tried to do throughout my ministry here for the last 20 years, to be that mirror for you as a congregation and as individuals. And my intention this morning is a process that began way back last September when I came to, look at them back there. We can see just so little of you. Maybe you'd like to come out as I mention your name, and you could sit out here because you're going to want to sit out here for the video anyway. But, so Marianne Kitts, and David Saylor, and Doug Andrews, and Irene Sanderson, and Joe Ponticello. And we are missing Lawrence Ramsey, who was here at the earlier service, but is not here now. And we started talking about what people might need at about this time of the year, as we're on the threshold of what has been and on the on the cusp of what has been and on the threshold of what is yet to be. And we started talking about a project where maybe members of the congregation who've been around for a while could be interviewed about other times of transition earlier in the congregation's history, so that you could learn something from those who've been through it. And my thought was that maybe through such a project you could come to know some of what it has been like and what it might be like, and so that maybe you could go away feeling more hopeful and more confident, and a realization of the strength of this congregation, which is so important. Just in terms of the strength, think of your worship service here this morning, the religious education and moving forward, our Harvest of Power commissioning and the strength that brings to the congregation, the music program and the children's music program, which are so strong, and the Council on Ministry that is here to assess the strength of the congregation in an ongoing way. And after the video, I'm going to introduce you to Christina Williams. Some of you know Christina, and she wrote a piece for her Covenant group a few weeks ago and shared it with me, and I thought, what a wonderful thing that we might be able to share here this morning as part of this service too. Because it's all about cycles and whirling through and knowing what has been and the possibilities for what can be, and knowing the strength that is a part of this congregation. A word before we begin the video that I wanted to share with you. A video that, by the way, was produced by, the interviews were done by our Council on Ministry, and then they were all given to Jerry Freed, who was down really sick with the flu all week, and even with the flu, did the kind of editing that needed to occur in order for the video you're about to see to be here. I wanted to say a word about this video, in that you're going to hear, many of you are here since I've arrived, and so you know the congregation as it is to some significant extent. But there are many eras past. That's why we're talking about cycles today. And they have not all been smooth eras. There was a very brief, difficult era just before my arrival here. There was a longer, difficult era that will be referred to in the video during the tenure of Dr. George Pennington. Not that Dr. Pennington was a bad or evil man in any way. He was a very good man and a good minister. It was just that there was a difference in the vision of ministry that this congregation held and that George held. And you're going to hear a little bit of talk about that, and many of you don't know about that. So I wanted to let you know that that's what was going on in the background there. And so now, if we could, why don't we enjoy the video?
This is a time of some concern for several of us. It's a change, and change is always difficult, no matter how minor the difficulty is. So I think that I would really implore people to speak their minds, know that there are places for them to be heard, whether it's to other congregants, whether it's to the board, whether it's saying whatever it is that you want or need to say to Charlie before he leaves. Judy Tomlinson is there. We have such a structure. We have the ministerial relations committee. There are so many outlets to be heard, and nobody should live with their concerns silently.
Having come from a background that's not a congregationally based polity, one where you're assigned a minister and someone out there is deciding who your minister's going to be. The first time I saw this, I was just blown away because I was so used to the other kind of way of choosing a minister. But to have the congregation be that actively involved, I think is good for a congregation.
I became president somewhere around that time, and we had a problem in that the transition from Dr. Fletcher to Dr. Pennington had not really been made. It was felt by some of the congregation that Dr. Fletcher was a good guy and they shouldn't let him go, and of course by the other part that they needed a new minister. So they didn't really make the break that should have been made.
in talking with the UUA about transitions in strong congregations like ours, what they've said is that actually these transitions can make congregations even stronger than they were before, even though it's unsettling and it's always difficult to make change, that the congregation really can pull together, and I think that's what's going to happen here.
People wanted someone they felt comfortable with and that they felt was, whose sermons they could relate to, and that. So those were all things. And that was all part of the process of finding a new minister. We would go to different, to churches to hear our candidates speak.
I mean, every minister is going to have a very different style, and it's going to be an adjustment to an interim minister, and then it's going to be an adjustment from that into a settled minister. But that transition and having a period of time, in this case 2 years, I think is going to give the congregation plenty of time to reflect on what we're really looking for.
To prepare people for the upcoming transition, I think that it's important to remember that nobody's in this alone, for one thing, and for another, there's always some upheaval that comes, even if it's minor upheaval, there's always some that comes with change. It's part of the process, and I would invite everybody to stay on board and see it through to the other side, and to think about what it is that they want to see.
I think we just want to be real thoughtful and not necessarily cautious, but just even going into the interim, know what we want from that interim, which is different from what we're going to want from the settled minister. But to have given some real thought to what kind of person do we want to lead us in this point in our growth? To keep us stable, to keep us on an even keel, but to keep us moving forward.
We didn't experience any huge ups and downs for any of them. Half is the minister and the other half is the congregation. I mean, that's what keeps the church going, the people.
When you're doing a search, you really have to kind of put on paper for the packet that goes out and articulate to yourselves and within the congregation who you are as a congregation and how you want to be seen, and therefore who you want to be in your leadership.
Take a step backwards from that and say, what is going on in our congregation, even if I'm not involved in it actively? What is going on in the congregation that I really like? Mm-hmm. Who do we represent, and what are we doing as a congregation that I'm proud of and that I want to see continued? Maybe not in exact form, because there'll be different leadership.
This is a desirable post, and that there will be a competent person here who will be effective. So no, I'm not worried, as I haven't been in because they've all been competent, all four men in different ways. They've all had their strengths and their shortcomings.
The laity just have to step up and pick up some things that they aren't used to doing. And that requires patience and gentleness with each other, and I think a loving spirit and a forgiving spirit some of the time.
The church was never about to fall apart because of the minister, even when there were ministerial problems.
When we first joined the Montclair Church, it was a little conservative and not very warm.
I think it's also an opportunity to look at what is it we're missing. What would we like to be doing? What would we aspire to do that for whatever reasons we haven't been doing? And what might we look for in new ministerial leadership that would help us grow in that direction?
Charlie has helped to build the community and strengthen it in so many ways that I don't think we're going to be hurt that much by the change. I think that we're a strong community that will move forward fairly seamlessly.
If there's enough consensus about this social activism that we've enjoyed for the last 20 years with Charlie, and that's where we want to be, then we want to be careful to get a minister to come in, looking for a minister to come in who will build on that.
Most of the activities continued apace without grand upheavals, even when there were ministerial concerns up or down with the individual. The church has shown remarkable forward momentum and motion and growth.
Going through it this time, I see a lot, there's a lot of transparency.
The church, the congregation was always strong enough to weather any problems, and I'm sure that it will continue to be.
I would love to see our congregation grow. I think that the word that's been going around based on a study that was done is that we continue to have new members join us, but at the other end we're also staying kind of flat in terms of the numbers.
It is a really emotional time with Charlie leaving, and it's going to be difficult for many of us. But I'm sure that we're going to be able to come out of it with a clearer sense of what we're looking for, what the next chapter of this congregation is going to be, and I think with the strength to move towards that.
What I would want people to know as they're looking at the transition is that we will come out the other side of the transition different but better. That it will help us grow, because it will force us to really look at who we are and articulate who we are in a way that we don't do day to day.
You have to keep your mind open to a new experience and realize that there can be great things coming around the corner that you have no idea about.
Keep an open mind. Everything changes. If you don't like something, you change it or work at changing it.
It is a good time to look at our strengths and weaknesses if we do it in a positive way and not feel like we have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That we have so much good going on that I think we can stand looking at what things need to change.
Some thank yous, first of all. One certainly is to Jerry, but to the Council on Ministry for picking up this project, for doing the interviews. Thank you so much. A special thanks to those who participated in the interviews with them, those that you saw, some that did not become part of this. All of the interviews in some way will be saved in the archives so that there's a permanent record of all of those interviews that were conducted, and I don't even know, are we finished with them, or are there still some people that we're hoping to hear from perhaps, and those parts of the piece will be archived. Archives speak of the past, and you just heard people who were here in the past that brought us forward to where we are now, following a 25-year ministry, following a 40-year ministry, to a point of the kind of strength where we are now. And so we're looking archivally at the past. At the same time, we're looking anew at the future. And a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from Christina Williams, who I've gotten to know through New UU and 5 Questions, who work on the Undoing Racism Committee. And in her covenant group, her writing covenant group, she wrote a piece and sent me this email saying, I'm in the writing covenant group, and this month's topic is imagination. It turned into a piece about the UU. Laura Wilson, the group leader, suggested I share this with you, that you might like to know how I feel about this community. And as we think about our future, what I want is for you to know how Christina feels about this congregation. And I would like you to think about how you feel about this congregation.
Imagination at the corner of Valley and Church. According to Walt Disney's Cinderella, a dream is a wish your heart makes. And what is imagination but a waking dream, a wish your heart is making, a longing in your soul, maybe even a prayer? I never had much use for prayer. I don't believe in a supernatural power pulling the strings of his marionette creation. If your team wins the big game, it has nothing to do with the prayers you muttered over your chicken wings, as evidenced by the unanswered prayers still lingering over the opposing plate of nachos. A repaired air conditioner is not a reason to praise Jesus. No, not even in the middle of an Alabama August. Praise your emergency savings or your low-interest credit card, if you will, but Jesus was a carpenter, not a repairman. And what of the big prayers? Making it through chemotherapy, escaping that house fire, bouncing back from that aneurysm. The cemeteries are full of people who had those same prayers. I was walking home through my new town one day when I passed an earthy, crunchy-looking building with a marriage equality banner hung from its window. Churches up north sure are different, I thought. I continued on my way and then noticed a sign in front of this building. Now, I'm very familiar with message signs in front of churches. I've been driving past them shaking my head my whole life. Repent, the end is near. Honk if you love Jesus. Free coffee and everlasting life. This sign was different though. For one, it was beautiful. A wooden case with a glass front. The message printed on paper in a lovely font, yellow tulips planted around its base. This sign didn't force itself upon me. It invited me to read. So I stopped and I read. Let us listen to our own prayers. It is we who will make them real. Dang Ming Dao. It may seem that I've strayed quite away from imagination, but not so. You see, I used to be full of imagination. I had dreams for my life, great things to accomplish. I believed they would all happen. And somewhere along the way, I stopped believing in imagination. I stopped believing in dreams. Too many disappointments. And yet there I stood, on a sidewalk in this town, and this state, and this part of the country, where I was all alone, and there was a message for me. Let us listen to our own prayers. It is we who will make them real. That is when my imaginings started to come true. I imagined myself crossing the finish line of the New York City Marathon, and now I sit here in my living room looking at my medal on the bookshelf. I imagined a cold apartment turned into a welcoming home, and now I have curtains and painted walls and artwork and books and mementos of happy times surrounding me. I imagined standing in front of my favorite painting in Vienna, and I did just that, overwhelmed by emotion that I had made it happen all by myself. I imagined gathering with friends for coffee on a Saturday morning, and in a few hours I'll be sharing this writing with those friends. I imagined being part of a loving family, people who love me just the way I am, and I found that family in the earthy, crunchy-looking building with its rainbow banner and its message board of hope. There is so much more I imagine for myself and for this world. I imagine a bachelor's degree, so I've got an afternoon full of algebra ahead of me. I imagine more marathons, so I'll wake up in the mornings and run. I imagine a book with my name on it, so I'll keep putting words on paper. I imagine a world where children feel free to find their own spiritual paths, so I'll teach the little ones on Sunday morning. I imagine a reformed justice system, a safe world for women, an end to war and hunger. So I'll sign petitions and join marches and cast my votes, and yes, I'll pray. Because, you see, some imaginings, some prayers are too big for one person to make real. It takes all of us, imagining that things can be different, having enough faith in our prayers to take a few small steps toward them, never giving up, even when it seems hopeless. So yes, I'll pray. I'll pray to the spirit of life and love that is in and of us all. I'll pray for the faith to keep trying. I'll pray that others will try. I'll pray that we will make a difference. And I imagine we will.
Links in a chain. We don't have to imagine the strength of this congregation. We've seen all kinds of evidence of it this morning, and we've heard evidence of it from the past. We can, with good conscience and good cause, imagine that strength living right into the future. We are here to seek and to find within ourselves that which is larger than ourselves so that we can be of service to it. As individuals, as a congregation, we are here to find within ourselves that which is larger than ourselves. And some closing thoughts. I want to share with you words that you've heard, that you've said, most of you, a number of times, from our new member welcoming ceremony. One of the things that's said by the new members is, I recognize the values of the past which have brought this congregation to where it is now. I accept the privilege and the responsibility of joining this congregation and affirm my willingness to support it. And a little bit later, everyone responds, love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship. For these purposes do we join together. Moving from the past to the future, you have every reason to know that this congregation has made those transitions and made them very well. You have every reason to have hope and confidence in the strength of this congregation moving forward. So what I'll ask you to do during this transition on a very regular basis is to hold that mirror up for one another so that you can see the best in yourself through the reflection of the other. To hold that mirror up as a congregation so that the world can see its best self through you. And in that way, the strength of this congregation will go on and on and on. Let's join together in our closing hymn, which is When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.